Hey, you know what that music means? It means it's time for another thrill-packed episode of Student of the Gun Radio. I am your host, Paul Markle, and I'll be along with you for this entire journey. I'll hold your hand, and we'll get through it together. And, of course, on the other side of the table, with his own little microphone there, he's got his own black carbon steel microphone, and he's got his super cool radio producer headphones on, is Jared. Jared, are you ready to get going, kick this off today?
I am very ready. I've got one question for you. Why has it got to be black?
Because it is.
Okay, I just wondered.
Oh, man. Folks, sweet Buddha on a rubber raft. Do we have a lot to talk about this week? And I've been kind of anxious to get in front of the microphone and to get talking. You know, quite often Jared and I will be doing the pre-show notes and the pre-show briefing and where we start, discussing the topics that we're going to talk about on the radio. And so I'll start editorializing, and then Jared will put up his hand and he'll say, save it for when we have the microphones on.
Sometimes the second time isn't as good as the first.
Well, actually, that it's funny that I've done several radio interviews with my friends, and with Tom and Michael and some of the other guys, Mark Walters from Armed American Radio, and we'll always have a phone conversation before we do the show. And we're like, well, what are we going to talk about? So we get on the topics and we'll spend 30 to 40 minutes. And I was talking to Tom several months ago, and he said, what we just did was we just did the segment right there. We should have had the microphones turned on for that, but that's pretty common. We've got, like I said, a lot to talk to you guys about. So stick with us, hold on to your seats because it's going to be a wild ride. And we want to acknowledge the fact that we have generous sponsors. We have a lot of good folks in the industry that support us. We support them because we believe in their products. Actually, the postman yesterday just brought me a new Crossbreed holster. So thank you, Mr. Postman. The Priority Mail ran, and I have a brand new Crossbreed holster with the leather horsehide backing, which I'm now in the process of breaking in. And we want to remember our friends down there in Cocoa, Florida at Keltec Weapons. Check them out at keltecweapons.com. Take a look at all the neat and cool stuff they've got going. Don't forget about Colt Manufacturing. And in addition to Colt Manufacturing, we worked with some Colt guns last week. We were going to do a segment that we've been doing, and it's called the XS Sights Good Guy of the Week. Now, if you're new to the show, we know that every week, there's new listeners, and so we're going to lay it down for you right here. We like audience participation. We like it when you folks out there get involved in the show. It lets us know that you're paying attention, that you're actually listening, that you're actually thinking. And that's what being a student of the gun is all about. It's not just accepting, it's thinking. And every week we get feedback from you guys. We get questions and observations and so forth. And what Jared will do is he'll go into the forums, the various forums. We've got the official forum at Student of the Gun, forums at studentofthegun.com. Then we have our Facebook. Then we have info at Student of the Gun, all these different ways you can contact us. And he'll get in there and he'll find a good question, a question that's topical, and post it, and we'll address it right here on the show. And the benefit to you is if your question is chosen as the XS Sights Good Guy of the Week, then you're going to get a Good Guy packet. And we kind of glossed over this the last couple of weeks, Jared. We haven't really hit on what the Good Guy packet includes, but you get an XS Sights t-shirt. It's a black shirt. It says XS Sights on the front, and then across the back in bold letters, it says Good Guy, to let the whole world know that you are indeed a good guy. You're one of the good guys. And in addition to the T-shirt, you get a bag, like a little pack. Like I think it's a single sling pack kind of a deal, and patches and stickers, and the latest catalog. And our friends at XS Sights have been fantastic. They jumped on board with us this year. We're really happy to have them with us. And now, no, you don't get a free set of tritium sights. Those are, if you want tritium sights, you can buy them, but you can get the XS Good Guy. Now, before we get into that, Jared just put in my monitor, just popped up that we wanted to talk about our friend Andrew up in Avon, Indiana. Now, Andrew is an outdoorsman. He is part of the Indiana High School Rodeo Association. That's right. He's a rodeo kid. And he's also, it says he's in the marching band. And what we did is we decided we were going to sponsor Andrew this year for the rodeo season. So if you're in the Indiana area, if you're up there and you participate in the High School Scholastic Rodeo Association there, you might see an official Student of the Gun banner at some of these events. So we wanted to say good luck to you this year, Andrew, and congratulations.
One of the things that really stuck out to me about Andrew is one of the quotes that he said here. It says, I think this was in the initial email that we received. It says, instead of wasting my time getting useless sponsors, I wanted to make a difference. And this is a 15-year-old kid that is already thinking about how he can make a difference. That just stuck out to me.
Yep. So Andrew, and what did he sent us a letter, and he said the first time we said his name on the radio, he ran through the house screaming like Weird Al Yankovic, hearing his song on the radio for the first time. But so, all right, Andrew, tell all your buddies at school that we talked about you this week on Student of the Gun.
And the pictures that you sent us in the email, they'll be up on the Student of the Gun radio. So you could go there right now and look at them, share that with your friends, and I'll send you the links to your email once I'm finished with them.
Okay, folks. Jared is going to go ahead and tell us who our Excess Sites Good Guy of the Week is and what was their question.
Our Excess Sites Good Guy of the Week is Ron Frey, and this is kind of an older question. I dug back a little bit into the forums, and it was funny because I came across a question that said, does anybody respond to these questions anymore? And that particular thread, I just leave for the good guy questions, and I don't really answer them on the forum. So the answer to that question is yes, we do still deal with those questions. But the Ron, our good guy this week, says, it seems like almost every how-to article or video on shooting or self-defense argues that focus on the front sight is the best way to hit your target. Would you agree that maybe more attention should be paid to Colonel Rex Applegate's point shooting technique? It just seems logical that taking your eye off an attacker to look at the sight would be hard or impossible in a high-stress situation.
Okay, Ron, thanks for that question and giving us the opportunity to talk about this. And it's kind of funny. I've been in this shooting sports industry game. I've been paying attention and playing this game for going 3 decades, I guess now, going on 3 decades. And the point shooting versus aimed shooting debate, and it's funny because, Guns and Ammo and a lot of the gun magazines used to do, they would suck the reader in by putting on the cover, point shooting versus aimed fire, which is best in, blah, blah, blah. And you're supposed to, I want to know, I need to buy this magazine. And what's funny is all the articles that you would read, the what's best or head-to-head competition, 9mm versus 45, head-to-head, 1911 versus Glock, head-to-head, all those things. When you get to the end of the article, there really never is an answer. There's never a definitive, this is the best and this is the worst. And the trick in publishing is what people would, when I was doing a lot of writing for outdoor shooting sports magazines, and people would send in letters. They're like, this is what you need to do, man. You need to do a head-to-head competition, the Smith & Wesson versus Ruger or Glock versus SIG or whatever, and one of them needs to come out the winner, and the editors, up at the publishing houses would say, okay, that's an interesting letter. Thank you for participating. But which one of those sponsors or which one of those companies do you want us to alienate? They're like, what are you talking about, man? What are you talking about? Like, well, if we do a Glock versus SIG article and we declare Glock the winner over the SIG, then what that does is it tells the people they shouldn't buy SIGs and they should instead buy Glocks. SIG's not going to be real happy with us. And in the future, when we need to work with SIG, they're going to say, screw you guys. You told everyone in the world that our product was inferior. The fact is there are very few completely superior tools and completely inferior tools. And when it comes to tools and techniques, point shooting versus aimed fire. Well, there is no definite answer, but I can tell you this. Is it in fact possible for you to teach yourself to point shoot? You get a natural point of aim. Everyone's seen the pictures, or at least most gun people have seen the pictures of Applegate and Fairbarn, and pointing their toes directly at the target, crouching, and pointing the gun out.
If you go to studentofthegun.com, there's a Todd Jarrett video on there where he kind of explains natural point of aim.
Yeah, about aligning your body to the target. And that is an important part of marksmanship, especially if you're talking about competition marksmanship or target shooting. You always want to make sure that you're naturally aligned with the target if you have the time and opportunity to do that. If you're shooting a competition and they give you prep time, yeah, you have plenty of time to align your body and get a natural point of aim towards the target. But the problem is you can't always do that. If someone is attacking you, legitimately attacking you, chances are really good that you are not going to be in your perfect or preferred shooting stance. Hopefully you'll still be on your feet, but you may have been knocked to your butt. You may be laying on the ground. You may be shooting from up underneath a table or a chair or a round cover or a car. And all of the time that you spent on the range practicing your perfect point shooting technique. I've seen these guys out on the range. They, sit a silhouette out and they line themselves up and they get in that exact crouch and they draw and they hold the gun level and, point their finger at it and they're able to hit the target. Yeah. If you do something enough times, you can get really good at it. What I will say about point shooting versus aimed fire is that point shooting works some of the time, whereas aimed shooting works all of the time. Now, there's always a certain amount of point shooting that goes on. Max Michel, the legitimately the fastest shooter in the world, he's like the world speed shooting champ and the national speed shooting champion. When I was on the range with Max, he said, if the target's within 7 yards, he said, I don't even really see my front sight. He said, because I don't need to see the front sight to hit that target. He's shooting a steel silhouette. If it's within 7 yards, he knows, but then again, he's lined up on the target. He has his natural point of aim. He's got his toes pointing directly downrange towards the target. He can draw and hit that target in about a second to, 3/4 of a second without seeing his front sight. He said, but if it gets beyond 5, 6, 7 yards, he goes, I always take that extra time to find that front sight. And now if you're moving, your feet are moving, you're in a bad position, you're shooting with only one hand, you're shooting with your offhand. If you place the sight on the target, that is how you hit it. We talked about this before. I mean, how do you know where the muzzle is in relationship to the target? Well, you know based upon where the front sight is. So in the point shooting versus aimed fire, this is what we're gonna say. Number one, practice. Number two, point shooting works sometimes. It does. If someone's like right across from you, point shooting can work. Point shooting doesn't always work. Aimed fire always works. So do what you want to do. Invest your time however you want to invest it. But know this, that there is no perfect answer. There is no absolute. And I'll give you a little lanyap to take with you. One of the things that I used to teach when we would do night fire with the troops out there, and we had to shoot at a kind of an olive drab green silhouette. And all they had for the shooters to use, they used a flashlight at 15 yards. I think it was like 10 or 15 yards, either way. But some of the shooting they had to do with only the aid of ambient light. We used to use vehicle lights, and there'd be vehicle lights behind the shooters, and the silhouettes were just kind of shadows. And the students would say, well, I can't see my front sight. I can't pick up my stand, because, military guns don't have the luminous sights. They don't have tritium sights. They don't spend money on excess sights for military pistols. And what I would tell them, I said, when you punch the gun out, can you make out the silhouette of the slide in front of you? And they're like, well, yeah, I can see the silhouette of the slide in front of me. And I'd say, well, here's the deal. That target is close enough that if you can put the outline of the slide into the center of that silhouette, you'll be able to hit it. Because people were getting really bunged up because they couldn't see their front sights in the dark. And I said, well, just use the outline of the slide as your reference. Make sure that's placed on the target. And if they did that, if they paid attention and did that, they usually were very, very successful. So there's a little lanyard for you to take, and you put that in your hat and take it with you. Folks, it's time to talk about what's going on in Connecticut. Obviously, you've seen the title of this week's episode. Essentially, is it's Connecticut Matters. What is happening in Connecticut matters to you. If you're in the United States of America, it matters. And some of you folks out there, if you live in the South, if you live in the West, Midwest, you might be thinking, you know what? I don't care about what happens in Connecticut because I don't live in Connecticut. And those people made their beds. They've been reasonable for all these years, just being good little slaves up there, being reasonable, making deals with the devil, and the devil never can be satisfied. He never has enough. Well, now they're getting bent over. And I've actually talked to a lot of people that are in the shooting industry, that are gun people, especially in the South, and they're like, you know what? You get what you get what you pay for, or they're reaping what they have sown up there, and I don't feel sorry for them at all. And I can understand that. I really can, because let's face it, folks, when you think that you can be reasonable enough to keep your enemy at bay, while we're not going to defeat our enemy, we're going to reason with our enemy, and we're going to bargain with our enemy, and we're going to come to terms with our enemy. And what we should have learned from experience is that your enemies have to be defeated. Enemies can't be reasoned with. And what we've got going on right now in the state of Connecticut is, I guess you could call it's a liberty test. This is a test, and it's a pass-fail. And right now, it doesn't look so good that the citizens of the state of Connecticut are going to pass the liberty test. There's already been thousands upon thousands that failed. Not all of them failed, but a lot did. Let's give us a quick rehash for those of you that are new to Student of the Gun Radio, or perhaps you've been one of those guys who lives in Texas or Arizona or Florida or whatever, and you're like, I don't care what happens in Connecticut. It doesn't bother me. Those people can live with their own problems. Well, essentially the statist, the elitist politicians in Connecticut use the massacre or what have you. They use the Sandy Hook incident as their excuse to disarm the people. Now, Connecticut is already, for years, they've had pretty restrictive firearms laws in place. They already existed. As a matter of fact, the whole incident, the whole Sandy Hook incident, was a glaring example of how gun laws don't keep people safe. And what do we know about liberalism? Liberalism, easy for me to say, is a mental disease. And if you're trying to convince people that a murderer, that someone who's willing to commit multiple murder, that's pretty much the highest crime you can commit, right, is to kill another human being. That person who's willing to do that is not somehow going to do it because you added some extra anti-gun laws into the mix. It's disingenuous. It's a lie. But what they did up in Connecticut is they used that to create a crisis, and then they rushed through legislation in, quote, emergency sessions to create even stricter gun laws. And that, because what do we know about liberals? What do we know about anti-gun people? They're never, ever, ever satisfied. They never stop and say, well, we have enough gun control laws on the books right now. We don't need any more. No, they never say that. They pass one law, then that law is a failure, and then they come back and say, well, that law failed, so we need more laws. We need even more laws to keep you safe and to keep you secure. It's a lie, and stop believing the lie. But in Connecticut, they rammed through these new assault weapons bans and so forth. And one of the things that they put through is that if you had one of these super evil assault weapons, these super evil rifles that apparently have minds of their own and can cause people who would normally not do so to go out and commit wholesale murder, if you have one and you wish to keep it, then you have to get a permission slip from the state in order to keep that. Oh, and if you have evil assault magazines that hold too many rounds, you have to register those with the state. Now, obviously, pro-gun Second Amendment people, we've been warning the country for years that do not agree to registration. Don't do it. Don't do it. Oh, no. And what have we been told? Well, that's only reasonable. And what's the big deal? And we have to register our cars, so what's the big deal about registering our guns? Well, did they ever, after you registered your car, did they ever come to your house and say, we know you own a Chevy pickup truck and we're going to confiscate your truck and take it away? Well, maybe if you don't make your payments, they do, but otherwise, no. Well, a lot of comfortable slaves, and we've seen the pictures, you guys have seen the pictures, of the comfortable slaves in line to surrender and give up their rights. We had, hundreds, if not thousands of people lined up outside of the, State Department of Emergency Services or something, Jared, over there? The one who's sending out all these threatening letters to the people in Connecticut.
They were lined up with their loaded guns, weren't they?
No, they were. No, they had to have the information. They were forbidden to have firearms.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they were forbidden to actually possess the firearms. So they lined up unarmed to submit. And they had to get the special paperwork and fill out all this rigmarole. And it had to be postmarked by January 1st. Well, what did we find out? We found out after that the state admitted that there were thousands upon thousands of evil gun owners, people who own these evil guns and these evil magazines. And then they started throwing out weird numbers like anywhere from 30 to 50,000 or anywhere from 50 to 100,000, or, we know that it's so many. These evil guns were not registered, and these, and they're like, oh, we anticipate up to 100,000 evil magazines were not registered. And and we talked about this on the show, but they said, well, here's what we're going to do. We're considering doing an amnesty period where those of you who didn't register your evil hardware with the state and get a permission slip, that we'll give you a grace period to go ahead and do it. And they kicked that around. Well, it looks like they've decided the answer is no. But what did they get? Well, they got a bunch of paperwork. It's only in the hundreds, like 107 or 108 or something like that. They did get forms that arrived at the State Department of Emergency Services or something for the state police that were not postmarked by the 1st of January, by January 1st, which was the deadline. And so, well, what does that mean? Well, that means that what these people did, these errant slaves or comfortable slaves or confused slaves, is they put all their information, their names, addresses, phone numbers, everything, the descriptions and serial numbers of their evil rifles. They put all that stuff on this paperwork, submitted it to the state, but it didn't get to the state by the 1st. So the state has decided that they're not going to accept that as a valid registration, but now they know. Now they know who has the guns and or magazines and where they are. So they've decided to send out notifications to these people saying, hey, here's what's going on. We know that you have these guns because you told us, but we're not approving this paperwork. So what you have to do now is you have to either sell the gun to a dealer, remove it from the state, sell it out of state, or disable or destroy it, or turn it in. That's right. You have the option of turning your lawfully owned property over to the state. And that this whole thing, the thing about the letter, and what's funny is a copy of this letter went up on the internet and it went viral immediately. And almost as soon as it went viral, you had people that said, "No, it's a fraud. It's a fake. It doesn't exist. They're not doing that." Okay. And, we were in a weird boat this week. We were looking online, we were doing research, and we were trying, there were so many copies of this thing out there but then you had, and we didn't want to be wrong. We didn't have the fraud, that we didn't know whether or not it was a fraud, because is it possible that somebody could make up a fake letter and post it? Sure it is. So we came across this little audio clip, and what struck us is when I got I don't even remember how I got it, but when I got the link to this audio clip of a phone call of Lieutenant Vance from the Connecticut State Police. Now, you guys may remember Lieutenant Vance, and Lieutenant Vance was the same guy that they put out after the Sandy Hook incident to talk to the news people every day. And so we recognized his face, and I was like, I recognize that guy. Let me give you the setup right here. The setup is a woman calls the Connecticut State Police Office, the Department of whatever, Emergency Services or what have you, and says that she has questions and she wants to speak to a sworn law enforcement officer, someone so the receptionist says, "Well, I'll patch you through." So they patch him through, and the person who answers the phone is the Public Relations and Media Officer, Lieutenant Vance. And so the person on the other end sounds like a woman. She says that her husband received one of these letters stating that they knew that he had the guns and that he had to do one of the following four things, sell it, destroy it, turn it in, or sell it out of state or something like that, transfer it to someone out of state. He could not possess it. And so Lieutenant Vance says, "Yes, that's correct. Those are the four requirements. You have to do one of four of those four things." And she said, "Well, what if he doesn't?" And Vance says, well, if he doesn't, then, that's not up to me. You need to talk to your attorney, yada, yada, yada. And it goes on. And she says to him, and people are like, well, this is bullcrap, or, this isn't really fair, because she was goading him. She was trying to goad him. And it's not his fault. He's just trying to be patient with her and answer her questions. And at one point in the conversation, she asks if, they would be willing to go. He says, "It's not our responsibility. You're talking to the wrong person. You need to talk to your representatives," and so forth. And she said, "Well, yeah, I understand that." She says, "But it's not them that's going to go around to people's houses and try and take their property. It's the police." And that's when we get this right here.
Okay, so what will happen then if my husband refuses? Will you come to our home to arrest him?
Well, I certainly wouldn't, but he could be subject to arrest. We haven't crossed that bridge just yet, to be honest with you. I don't have a good answer for you as to what would happen. I know that letter was sent out with the intent to tell people that, basically we know you have the weapon, and if that in fact is accurate and you haven't gotten rid of it, here are your options if you want to be within the boundaries of the law.
Okay, so isn't this a very slippery slope that's going on here? Going to put the police in harm's way?
I don't see that, ma'am. But
you mean going door to door to people's homes, if it comes down to that, is not putting the police in harm's way?
Well, I don't know. We're in harm's way every day, ma'am. I don't look at it like that. We just simply want people to abide by whatever the laws are, and we're sworn to uphold the law. That's
But did you take an oath? Did you take an oath to the Constitution, Lieutenant Vance?
Did I take an oath to the Constitution? What bearing does that have in this conversation, ma'am?
Well, because any law that is unconstitutional is null and void.
People are putting the cart before the horse here.
No, because we have to have this discussion because it's getting very dangerous.
Not with me, ma'am. Not with me. With your legislators would be the proper place.
No, because the police are the ones that are going to be used to enforce this law.
We certainly do enforce all laws, ma'am.
The conversation.
I don't want to talk about the Constitution, ma'am, at all. Not at all.
I said the conversation.
We're talking about state law.
I said the conversation. I didn't say Constitution.
That is really when we get kind of a window into Lieutenant Vance's soul here. Like I said, a lot of people have said, "Oh, this isn't fair," and that was that shouldn't have happened. And but what we get is we get a little window into the soul of Lieutenant Vance there. And as you listen, I want you guys to go ahead and take the time when you get a chance. If you haven't listened to it yet, I'm assuming a lot of you have. But go to studentofthegunradio.com, and there'll be a direct link there, and because it's over 7 minutes. This whole audio clip is over 7 minutes long. But here's some of the poll quotes that we got from that specific instance. He says to her, "Possession is a felony." All right. And he says, "We know you have the weapon." Okay. And she asks him about an oath, and he says, "What bearing does that have?" And then, of course, he says, "I don't want to talk about the Constitution at all, ma'am." And then at the end, he says to her, "Sounds to me like you're anti-American." And that is actually one of the big poll quotes that everybody is people on our side are kind of excited about. Now, I would ask when Lieutenant Vance, if you're listening, we don't think Lieutenant Vance is listening, but when you go to the police academy in Connecticut to become a sworn police officer, do you or do you not take constitutional law? I know I did when I went through the police academy. We had to study constitutional law. We were tested on it. We had to know constitutional law. And we spent a lot of time talking about constitutional law. Because why? Well, because there's this little thing, there's this supremacy clause. And what Lieutenant Vance seems to have forgotten, he's talking about, it's Connecticut law and it's a lawful law and we can do whatever we want. But Lieutenant Vance, you really can't. No state in the Union can make a law that contradicts or eliminates or nullifies the United States Constitution. That's why all of the states had to ratify the Constitution for it to become the law of the land. Apparently, Lieutenant Vance doesn't know that. Apparently, Lieutenant Vance thinks that the governor in Connecticut can override and supersede the United States Constitution. Somebody might want to remind Lieutenant Vance that there is this thing called the Bill of Rights, and that when you are an employee or a representative of the state, if you are someone who has the authority granted by a government agency, now in the police world we call that acting under color of law. Acting under color of law. How many of you guys remember the Rodney King incident? Yeah, I know some of you are old enough to remember the Rodney King incident. And the reason that the federal government stepped in and they violated the Constitution through double jeopardy, but they tried these guys. They were first acquitted, and so that wasn't good enough. So the federal government stepped in and retried them for civil rights violations. Now, what do you have to be, or what do you have to be able, what position do you have to be in to be tried with or for a civil rights violation? Well, you have to be acting under color of law. You and I, if I don't like you and you don't like me, I can't charge you with a civil rights violation. But if I'm a police officer and I use my authority as a police officer to deprive you, quote, of your civil rights, then I can be charged with that. Well, and that is why, Lieutenant Vance, that is why that the Bill of Rights of the Constitution, the first 10 amendments, because apparently they don't teach that up there in Connecticut. So somebody might want to go ahead and send Lieutenant Vance a copy of the Bill of Rights, which is also the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution, because apparently they do not teach that in Connecticut, and he's unaware of it. We know that Lieutenant Vance is not only is he unaware of the Second Amendment of the Bill of Rights, and he thinks that the state of Connecticut can supersede that the governor in Connecticut can nullify it. Hey, Jared, what is the what do they call, every state has a nickname. Like Ohio is the Buckeye State, and, Michigan is the Wolverine State, and Oklahoma is the Sooner State, and Florida is the Sunshine State. Now, Connecticut, they have something on their license plate, and it says that they are the
opposite of what this dude's talking about.
What does it say on the plates in Connecticut?
I'm pretty sure it says the Constitution State.
What?
Maybe that's why he doesn't want to talk about it.
Maybe yeah. Connecticut, they put on their license plates that they are the Constitution State. Wow, the irony is so thick I can hardly see through it. Well, Lieutenant Vance, the reason that we know Lieutenant Vance is because about a little more than a year ago, he was in front of the microphones almost every day after the Sandy Hook incident. And we got a window into Lieutenant Vance's soul, into his psyche, into how he thinks and what he thinks about the Constitution when he gave a little press conference to discuss people on social media who were talking about the Sandy Hook incident. And he was pretty upset that there were people out there on social media, and he said this.
One thing that's becoming somewhat of a concern, and that is misinformation that's being posted on social media sites. There has been misinformation coming from people posing as the shooter in this case, using other IDs, mimicking this crime and crime scene and criminal activity that took place in this community. There's been some things in somewhat of a threatening manner. It is important to note that we have discussed with federal authorities that these issues are crimes. They will be investigated statewide and federally, and prosecution will take place when people perpetrating this information are identified.
So based upon just those two audio clips from our good friend up there, Lieutenant Vance in Connecticut, we know that not only does he not understand or seem to have read the Second Amendment of the Bill of Rights, he apparently hasn't read or understood the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights either. Apparently, in Lieutenant Vance's mind, if he doesn't want you to talk about something, he is going to declare that a crime, and he's going to investigate and potentially arrest you because he doesn't want you talking about that. I wonder if Lieutenant Vance is going to issue a warning to Student of the Gun and tell us that we're not allowed to talk about this, and that if he catches us talking about this, he's going to get the federal authorities involved. Hey, Lieutenant Vance, you're so excited about getting the federal authorities involved? Maybe you might want to understand what federal means. Well, let me see. He doesn't believe that the Constitution of the United States supersedes the Connecticut state law. He doesn't understand that. He thinks that the lawful law in Connecticut supersedes the Constitution. On one hand, he thinks that Connecticut can decide for themselves what they want and do not want to do when it comes to firearms. Okay. But on the other hand, he wants the federal government to come in and silence you people out there on social media for saying things that he doesn't agree with or want to hear. Folks, this is real. It's going on right now. It's a liberty test, and it's a pass or fail liberty test. Now, something else that we will absolutely discuss this week on Student of the Gun is the responsibility of law enforcement in the United States of America. Now, many, many moons ago, when I became a United States Marine, I took an oath of allegiance, and you guys can look up the oath of allegiance that every military person takes. And in the oath of allegiance, it says that, Jared, why don't you do me a favor? Rather than me paraphrase it, why don't you go ahead and pull up the oath of enlistment for the United States military? Because I don't want to paraphrase it. I want to say it exactly. Because there is a phrase in there that actually is very important, and it's something that you need to understand. Now, people will say, somebody actually said that in defense of the police officers are like, well, you can't take it up with them. It's not their fault, and it's not their responsibility. It's the responsibility of the lawmakers and the government, or the governor, and those are the people you should be angry at. You can't be angry at police officers for, quote, doing their job. That's what we've seen several of those. They're doing their job. They're doing their job. Okay, and it's not their responsibility. They can't not do their job. All right. Did you find it over there?
Yeah, there's a couple different ones. Hold on.
The oath of enlistment. So we've got you got to understand that this situation. The lady on the phone call thing asked Lieutenant Vance if he would be willing to come to her house and take her husband's gun or arrest her husband or what have you. And he's like, I wouldn't do that. She goes, no, you wouldn't personally, but you would send people to. And it's not the governor of Connecticut who's going to come to your house and arrest you and take your guns. It's not Barack Obama who's going to come. Oops, I said the word. It's not Barry Soetoro, the communist crusader formerly known as Barry Soetoro, or Joe Biden. Those aren't the people that are going to come to your house at 2 a.m., smash through your front door. No, that's not them. They're going to send their minions out to do it. And the question we have to ask ourselves as a nation is, are the minions held harmless? And you've got it there?
Yeah, I've got it. It says, quote, I
state your name,
do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me, according to regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice, so help me God.
Okay. So full faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and, what does it say, the Constitution, and bearing full faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States.
And the orders of the officers appointed over me.
According to the
regulation of the Uniform
Code of Military Justice. And in military shorthand, we call that the UCMJ. Now, and people say, well, yeah, see, it says you swear to do whatever the president tells you. No, you swear to do what the officers and the president appointed above you, according to the Code of Uniform Code of Military Justice. Okay. The UCMJ. And when you go through basic training, you go through UCMJ training, that you go through classes, and they teach you all about the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And one of the things that they teach you in the Uniform Code of Military Justice is that, in short, following orders is not an excuse for unlawful behavior. You cannot do something that is unlawful or that violates the code of conduct and then say, as your excuse, I was just following orders, so it's okay. And it was, there's been several instances in the history of the world, in the history of the United States of America, where soldiers have been put into jail or executed because they committed crimes. They committed war crimes and so forth. And occasionally they have tried to say, well, it's not my fault. I was just following orders. And we were drugged through many of these trials as a nation in the 70s, during the Vietnam era. But essentially it's this, it is your responsibility, even if you're an E1, if you're a private. I was taught this. I remember it very vividly. I remember going through classes on Parris Island, South Carolina, when I went through military or Marine Corps basic training, that it is the responsibility of each and every service member, regardless of rank, to follow the Uniform Code of Military Justice and the rules of land warfare and so forth. And guess what we were taught in Marine Corps basic? I know you're holding your breath. What were you taught, Paul? We were taught the Constitution. We were taught constitutional law and the Bill of Rights. We were taught that. And you say, well, but what does this have to do with anything? Well, what it has to do with is you cannot violate the law. You cannot violate the law of the land and claim ignorance or claim, basically innocence because someone told you to do it. Can't do it. And folks, if you're a law enforcement officer out there, I hope you got a mirror. I hope your mirror is clean, because you need to look yourself in the eye, and you need to say, will I violate the Constitution of the United States of America? And it's not hard, folks. It was written in very simple English. It was written very clearly and simply so that every citizen could understand it, not just lawyers and politicians. Will you do it? And do you think, how many of you out there, men and women in blue, think that because your superiors tell you to do it, therefore it is okay? Every man and woman is responsible for their own behavior. You say, well, I don't believe you. There's no historical precedent for that. Actually, there's a lot of historical precedent for that. But probably one of the largest and most widely understood or known historical precedents for following orders is not an excuse are the Nuremberg trials. Now, for all you kids out there who went through public school and you don't know what the Nuremberg trials were, well, they were war crimes tribunals that were held after the cessation of violence in World War II. And they were held in a place called Nuremberg, Germany. And a lot of Nazis got their necks stretched. Many, many hundreds of Nazis were found guilty and executed. And one of their big excuses of the Nazi prison camp guards and the concentration camp guards and so forth was, I was just following orders. I was just doing what I was told. Therefore, you cannot find me guilty. Well, folks, it didn't wash then, and it's not going to wash now. You better take an example or lesson from history. Look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, will I violate the Constitution? Will I violate my fellow citizens? Yes or no? Make the choice yourself.
And one thing that we need to do as a nation is stand up and help each other, help Connecticut, help their residents to fight for their rights. I'm going to read this in its entirety, word for word, because it's something that everybody knows of, but I don't know if you know the exact quote. I actually had to look it up, and this is from a guy named Martin Niemöller. He's German, I guess. He said he was a prominent Protestant pastor who opposed the Nazi regime. And it says, first they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. So
Jared's going to put that quote in the show notes for you guys.
Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes as well. But if you wait, because you don't live in Connecticut, so why should you help Connecticut? Well, what happens when they come to you? What if all the other states are already gone?
Yeah, folks, don't delude yourself. Don't think that that Governor Cuomo is not sitting up there in Albany watching Connecticut. Don't think that that Christie is not watching what's happening in Connecticut. And who's the communist? Whoever the communist that is in charge of Massachusetts and Maryland, and don't think that all these statists, that all these political elitists, don't think they're not watching what's going on in Connecticut. And if Connecticut falls, if the people capitulate, if they fall in line and walk into the showers, then there's nothing to stop the Kumos and the Christies and all the other socialists and statists from doing the exact same thing in their states. And we've got to set an example. The example has to be set in Connecticut. We can read. We understand what the Constitution says. You have overstepped your bounds, and we're not going to take it anymore. The answer is no. You cannot disarm us. You do not have the authority to disarm the people. I don't care what you voted on under the cover of darkness without any, that what they did in Connecticut, every single member of the House and Senate and the governor in Connecticut need to be ousted. They need to be jailed because what they did was deceitful and dishonest. They ran that crap through and then said, and there were hundreds of people in Connecticut who stood up and opposed it. And they essentially said, we don't care. We don't want to hear from you. We're going to do what we want. Too bad, peasants. And if Connecticut falls, look for Massachusetts already almost gone anyway. Maryland is too, and so is New York. But if you want to see complete and total disarmament of New England, let Connecticut fall. So we're glad that we could give you a little happy note there. All right, that's going to bring us right to the end of segment number 1 of this week's episode of Student of the Gun Radio. Thank you very much for joining us. Before we go, I want to address something real quick. We've gotten several emails and several messages and saying, well, Paul, you're always talking about part 2, and I can never hear it. What's up with that? And that's primarily from people who use the Stitcher app.
I fixed it.
Did you fix it?
Yep. I emailed our contact at Stitcher, and she said she didn't realize it was a more than one part show because it wasn't in the beginning.
Oh, okay.
So it's fixed now.
Okay, yeah, because we know Stitcher, they weren't. I think they only archived 10 shows, right, Jared?
I'm not sure. They did a lot of upgrading recently.
Okay, yeah, Stitcher, they would only archive 10 shows back at max, and we really, in the beginning. When we first started Student of the Gun Radio, basically what you had was you had iTunes for you Apple phone people, and then you had Stitcher for you Android people, and that was pretty much the only game in town. Well, it's not the only game in town yet, and that's probably why Stitcher's been making upgrades. But don't forget about the mobile app. We've got the Student of the Gun mobile app. It is available. It is free. All you have to do is go to the iTunes Store or the Google Play Store and download it for nothing, thanks to our good friends at Century Arms. Don't forget to go to studentofthegun.com all the time, at least once a week, because there's always, at least once a week, there's a new article. We've been going kind of crazy here lately and putting out, multiple articles. And there's one right now that's up there that we're going to talk about during the next segment. In part 2, we've got a lot to talk about in part 2. We're going to talk about basically a nation divided, and is it time for you to choose sides? And if you don't choose sides, what does that mean to you? We're going to talk about, we've got some slave state news for you. We've got a Go Team moment coming out of Detroit again, another Go Team moment. And for all of you guys out there, this last week, we asked you to make suggestions for a Vagination Report theme music because we didn't have any theme music for our Vagination Report. So we're gonna debut the new Vagination Report theme music for you guys coming up in part 2 of this week's episode. So we'll be right back. Don't change that channel.